Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a registered therapist, coach, author, and speaker, and a mental health advocate. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maillard. How you doing, Duck?
Guess who's back? Well, I'm not going to sing the song because I don't want us to lose, but I can change it like the Simpsons do. Like, guess who's back? Back again. Duck is back. I'm back in town. Yeah. So, I'm back. Been a long couple of weeks where I've been away for work, but we managed to do some podcasts together. But I'm back in the office, back at the desk, and ready to rock.
Just in time for the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
Or when this will come out.
Right. Because right now it doesn't feel very holiday-like, but. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's great to be back with the family and back in the swing of life again.
So you had a pretty momentous occasion at the end of your run of this musical you were doing, which, to remind people, was the first time in decades.
25 years. 25 years, yeah.
That you were on stage and performing in a musical, and you had some anxieties that we talked about in some of the episodes.
Yeah.
But
it was yeah, go ahead. Sorry. You finish your arc.
Well, I was going to get to the end run. I don't want to, blow the story that I'm sure you want to tell in terms of the last couple shows and what that was for you. Let you tell that.
Well, it's a great little microcosm of the arc of both my kind of emotional and mental health journey, but also a great way to encapsulate kind of. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse from finishing out the show. We blew out our voices on the last night because we knew we didn't have another show the next day.
Right, really went for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's rare when you get an opportunity to kind of see in real time the thing that's causing you the anxiety, the process of dealing with it, kind of overcoming it, and seeing through to the end with true joy and like a sense of accomplishment. And that's what I had in this 6 weeks or whatever it was, which culminated honestly in the weekend that my family came and my son was there front row with my wife, and they got to see me sing and perform. And there wasn't a single moment where I felt that anxiety, where I felt that, the same old fear. And I could acknowledge, like I said, in real time, I could say to myself, this is one of the best nights of my life. Like it honestly, I felt that stress lift, and I felt that feeling of like, you have done the work, you have dealt with this. And yeah, I had a little blip at the beginning. You and I talked about it on previous episodes where I was like, I'm still feeling a little bit of those butterflies. But then I could go back, instead of having to go back 25 years and say, you were okay, you did this. I could go back 2 days ago and say, you remember when you were feeling a little anxious, but as soon as you got through that part of the show, you were fine. So maybe tonight we don't even bother with the butterflies and the anxious. And that's what happened. And honestly, it was a confluence of my own personal growth, my own joy for doing musical theater, my own joy for having my family there, seeing what I do, their love. Everything was just this perfect storm of positivity and love. And there's no way I'm going to get through the end of this without completely losing it, because it was the most emotionally fulfilling and wonderful feeling. We finished the run. One of the creators of the show came to our closing night show and came up on stage and sang with us. I mean, it was everything you could want from both a artistic and musical theater experience, but also a personal growth. And it was sort of this button on the end of this journey that made me go, it isn't all for nothing. And it isn't, it sometimes can feel like a bottomless pit that you're stuck in when you're dealing with anxiety. But for me to literally have these moments and have this achievement and have the love that when you came to the show and when my family came, it was the perfect reminder of why I did it and why it was worth facing that fear. And I feel like a new person. I feel like a different person. I feel like a stronger and braver person, ready to attack the next challenge that gives me fear, because I know if I can recreate that feeling again, there'll be absolutely no hesitation. So that's a big statement and a big monologue to say that the stuff we talk about on this podcast is 100% real and 100% worth dealing with and confronting, because the feeling on the other end is unlike anything I felt in over 25 years. The end.
Wow. Well, I'm so excited for you for having to, having that experience and getting to not only see in real time the work that you've been doing come to fruition, and both work, literal work, the work of being a performer and taking your craft very seriously, but also the personal work of facing your fears, dealing with the anxiety head on, and recognizing that even at its worst, it was something you could handle and you could overcome. And then on top of that, you got, well, before I get to that, let me just say, first off, I did come see your show, and I'm going to talk you up just for a minute. I know it'll embarrass you a little bit, but
oh, yeah, I hate it.
Oh yeah, you're not one of those ones that can't take a compliment.
No, I love it. Come on, give it to me.
Well, I will tell you, and the disclaimer or the precursor to this statement is that, this, I'm not really a musical theater person by nature. I don't know exactly the reason for that. I mean, I grew up in a musical theater family, really. My aunt was a Broadway star. My dad was really enamored he grew up in the era of, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, and, just West Side Story for both of my parents was like that was like Nirvana. What Nirvana was to me, West Side Story was to my parents. It was like they were 14 years old.
Sondheim was the Kurt Cobain of the 60s.
Yes, right. So I grew up around that stuff, but I think maybe it's just generational because my parents and my family was so into it, and I was a child of the 80s and 90s. I just rejected that and rebelled and found my own thing, which was much more dark and self-reflective and less, sort of performance in the traditional aspect. So I'm geared towards stuff that feels much more intimate, an artist just really speaking in a genuine way. And I walked into the performance of your show, and for those who haven't seen once, there's like a casual opening where the cast comes on stage while the audience is still sort of getting seated and stuff, and they just start kind of walking around and talking to each other and then singing songs. And they do like a whole series of songs in the opening, which was perfect for me. And it was just, I quite honestly was thinking to myself, this is the most fun I've ever had at a musical theater performance in my life. Because it felt like I was at a concert, it was like parts of it was kind of like Mumford and Sons. Some of it was like a throwback to like just really traditional Irish music. And then some, there was Czech music in there. And then also I loved that the whole performance was these actors doing something they love. I could feel these are all people that are, musical theater actors and actresses, but they also were musicians who had this dual love, and they were getting to do this. And each of them got to be featured in that opening as well, which I loved. Like every single cast member was featured. And to be honest with you, your feature, the song that you got to sing, was my favorite one of the bunch. Hey. And right off the bat, I was like, I know that Duck can do this. I've seen him in his element, on stage with the band Former Future that I worked with for a couple of years with you guys. And I've watched you act on screen, but I knew your musical theater background and just the kind of level of performance you can bring. But I hadn't seen it in that capacity where I was sitting literally front row center and my neck hurts still as a result, by the way.
Much to the chagrin of your neck.
But it was, I think part of it too is like I was immersed in it, and it was a real concert performance. And so I really did enjoy it, and you there were a few actors in that show that I really thought were great, and you were one of them. So, I just thought there was so much that I appreciate about it, and I was just happy for you. But what I was getting to was at the end of this run, your wife and your son come. Tell me what was so special about that. I can only imagine, but tell me a little bit more about why that was special.
Well, my wife and I share a love of musical theater, and we've always, we have a piano and we sit at the piano and sing, and, but it's never been, and it's always been sort of a theoretical love where, because my wife has sort of retired from performing as well. She's a casting producer and she's brilliant at it, but she's has the most beautiful voice and, you know, has a love for this stuff too. And it would be the same if I went to see her in a show. So it's sort of like this shared love that we both know is deep in our soul. And for them to you know, it's sort of like, you know, when people talk about being seen, like in the philosophical sense, for them to be there and looking up at me, and I couldn't look at them because, again, I would have lost it, and I did lose it at the end of the show, which you saw me too. I was a weeping mess. But for to look at them and have them see me in my element, but also for me to look at them and I see them, my son too. He loves it, and I mean, he's already talking about Juilliard. He's 11 years old. It's like, that's where I'm going. I'm going to go to New York. It was just this communal experience of like the three of us as a bonded unit of like, there's nothing that the three of us connect with more. And here I am doing it professionally really well with amazing, you know, it's not like I was in a crappy community theater production and they had to be like, well, you were good. You know what I mean? Like they could also be transported and be immersed in that world and appreciate, not only is this great, but that's my dad and that's my husband and he loves it and he's having a great time. You know, it was everything. It was 15 things all at once, all working and all being positive. And that's why I had the perspective to be able to say in the car on the drive home after the show with them saying like, this was one of the best nights of my life. And the fact that they were there with me to see that. And then I wanted to tell them that, so they knew how much it meant to me and how special it was. So they felt it too. I mean, literally, there was nowhere else to go. It was the top, and it was like, and from then on, it was the easiest. I mean, like they came with like 2 weeks to go in the run. The last 2 weeks were the easy breeziest. The stress that I felt of wanting to do a good show for them and perform well for them was lifted. That was the last sort of hurdle, you know. And so it was the last sort of step in my, I don't want to call it recovery, but my journey with this anxiety, which could come back. You know, I'm not under any illusion that I say I'm cured and this will never be an issue again. It might be. The next thing I do, I might feel those same fears, but I have this in the chamber now where I can go, you just did this and remember how you felt and remember the best night of your life. Let's do that again. So it's incredibly empowering and it's incredibly liberating, and it's an experience and a night that I'll never forget, literally till my dying day. So it's amazing. It's the most amazing experience I've had in 25 years.
It is amazing, and what I love about it most is that you sound like you were so present for it. Like you were able to appreciate it as it was happening. We don't get that many moments in life that are that special, you know, that we look back on like, that was the best night of my life. That was the best moment.
Usually
and a lot
it
of
takes
times,
years. It takes you years to look back and say, God, I wish I had known how great a night that was gonna be. You know, I wish I had and I do. I made the point to kind of take a step back and go, remember this. So sorry to interrupt.
I think I think it also gets harder as you get older to recognize that you're having those moments. When you're a kid, you're so, you know, sort of innocently present in a lot of ways, unless you've had some challenges that make it hard to be that way. But I think, you know, I when I was 12 years old and having a great moment on the baseball field, like there was no reason for me not to be present for that and to appreciate it as a great moment. But I think as you get older and as an adult and you have the stresses of life and the sort of time marching on and things can become, you know, it is more
the
difficult.
inevitable march towards death is what you're talking about.
I'm not taking this in a dark place. No, I'm just saying it gets harder to appreciate, I think, the special moments when you're having them. And that's something for us to cultivate, to remember, you know, that yes, there are a lot of hard times in life, and it is hard to kind of, we're working mostly when we're working on ourselves. How do I get through the hard times? How do I work through things and recognize like there will be better times in the future? But some of the work too is the positive part, right? The positive psychology. It's like, learn how to be present for the good moments, how to appreciate them, how to let them in. You know, and for you, like we talked about taking a compliment. It's like when somebody tells you like, this is great, you're great. Like, let that in. Like, a lot of us just kind of want to discard it and go like, oh yeah, you're just saying that, whatever. But when somebody's kind enough to give you a compliment, it's like, that's wonderful. And we get these moments in life that are truly just good moments that make us feel like life is worthwhile, that we're connected to something meaningful. And the more that we're able to be present for them and to connect in a truly genuine way to the people around us, to the thing that we're doing, to the process, to the flow, and to the moment. That really, it just, that's what makes, you have those sort of flashbulb moments, and that's what makes it a lot easier to get through the hard times. It's like, you could, like you said, you can look back and say, I remember that moment, that greatest moment of my life. And, I have more of those coming. If I can get through this time, there's going to be another one of those moments. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about it, because I'm not, I could talk about it forever, and I want to, but I'm excited to sort of close this chapter and say, all right, what's next? So the last thing I'll say about it is talking about that taking a compliment and taking someone's praise. It isn't really for me. It's a shared, musical theater and, a concert, things like that. That is a shared experience between artist and audience. And the applause at the end, the standing ovations that we received every night, thank you very much. That's the audience's turn to share their appreciation for what they were just a part of, and to like step on that and to be like, oh, stop, come on, it's too much. It's shortchanging their experience. So it's important to let the audience have that emotional catharsis, because this is a bittersweet show. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it doesn't. One of the reasons that it's so special is that it's not, boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, girl falls in love with boy, happy ever after. There's a lot of twists and turns and sort of things that don't always work out the way that they do in Hollywood endings. But there's kindness that's shared between every character in the play, and people who are adversaries in the play end up as friends in the end, and they do little kindnesses for each other. And the kindness of the audience giving that back to us is important. And that to transition out of talking about my show and back into the concepts that we always talk about here, that's important in life, is to let people have their relationship, their moments where they get to express what they feel, whether it's an unpopular opinion or something you want to hear, something you don't want to hear. It's really important that we let people have that voice to say, hey, I know this is a dumb thing, but what that conversation we just had, or that thing you said, it hurt me. And it's not a big deal, but I want to let you know. And for you to hear that and say, instead of dismissing it, I was just joking, for you to take that in and say, I hear you. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it, but thank you for having the courage and having the intimacy to be able to share that with me on a positive or a negative level. It's really important. That's the whole basis of human interaction. And so that's a lesson that I will remember from this and try to apply, more frequently, is like just to give everybody the space to have their experience, whatever that is, and just try to roll with it organically, for lack of a better word.
Well, that's something we try to do on the show, and what I love about doing this show. And so today we're going to give a special person an opportunity to share what's going on in her world. How's that for a transition?
Very well done. Someone who, by the way, also does not enjoy musical theater. She was very honest with me. She gets very uncomfortable. She's like, just sitting in there and people singing at me makes me uncomfortable. So you and she can bond over that.
Well, I love when you bring guests on the show also, because there's that backstory, and you seem to really stay friends with a lot of people from your background. I'm a little bit envious of that. But I love to kind of, we'll see how it goes. We don't really plan these things out that much, but I always love to start with, no, I want to hear the first and foremost, how the two of you guys interact with each other, because I love seeing that and just seeing the relationship. Her name is Allie Larkin. She is, or Allison Larkin, you might know her as. We've had best-selling authors on here before. A lot of them have been coaches or people that are keynote speakers, and they have their self-help kind of how-to books about self-improvement, personal growth, or business coaching. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first best-selling fiction author we've had.
I believe
which
so.
is,
Yeah.
and that is a very special thing. I dreamt of being a fiction author when I was a kid. I, of course, am an author now, but it was a memoir. It's not fiction. I still have the fantasy of someday writing my great novel. We'll see if I ever get to that. But
perhaps you can take a writing seminar with Allie. She does offer that service, and she can give you some pointers.
She does, and that's very intriguing.
Yeah.
I really want to kind of hear her perspective on things. And I know that she does coaching, and she has a creative community that she runs called the True Hearts Collective. And
it's one of the reasons why I thought she'd be a great guest, because she's one of those people that I don't even know how to explain it, and you'll just have to experience it for yourself, that she's just I even put it in, like, when we would kind of write show notes so Ryan knows, and I go, she's just pure. She's just a pure, like, when I see a video of like a squirrel being rescued and giving water, I'm like, Allie would do that. And I send it to her, and I'd be like, this made me think of you. She's like, oh, I'm going to go donate to squirrel rescue right now. Like, that's how quickly the like emotional connection for her is. And so it's spot on.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I haven't even met her yet. I'm already excited. So this should be great. I like when we do this too, when we do the intro before we have done the interview, because there's just a curiosity, and I like curiosity. All right. So without any further ado, here's our conversation with best-selling author Allie Larkin right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Allie Larkin, welcome to the Harder to Breathe podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much, Ryan. Hi, Doc.
Hello.
I'm good, and I'm really excited to get to talk with both of you. It's so good to see you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of your show, and Ryan, I loved your book.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just, and obviously I'm a big fan of Doc, so this is great.
Well, as we just learned in the intro, you weren't there, but I love hearing compliments. So tell me why you're such a big fan of me.
No, that's all right. Let's hear more about my book first. Let's go back to that. Well, that is fabulous that you have actually done the research on us. I know first and foremost that I want to hear the backstory here, because I was just telling Duck in the intro that I love when he brings a guest on, because I get to see the relationship, the connection, how this came to be. And that's really fun for me, both as a person, as a therapist. So I want to hear from you guys, what, and the slight differences in the story is always fun to see too,
Interesting.
So yeah.
Allie has the distinction of being one of, I think, maybe 12 people or something that was in our first college class, Monday morning, 9 a.m., the first day of college. We were in Intro to Acting together with a group of people that, honestly, what would you say, Allie? 6 of whom we are all still close and in touch. And even the rest of them, I mean, we're all friends online and stuff, but like, some of my closest friends for the past 30 years are from that first class, that first day, right?
Yeah, it was an amazing group of people, and I think also the intensity of it, being 18 years old, going into a class where you're sharing your feelings and your intimate moments and doing like body work. And I mean, I had to kiss people for my midterms, like we did scenes.
I feel like we were in a different class because I didn't get to kiss anybody.
I think that might have been second semester.
All right, okay.
But I think it's also being theater kids too, where there's a level of trust that you have to have. You don't have to like somebody, you have to trust them, and there's a level of intensity in those classes that it's an honor to share that space with someone. And I think we all had that sense of honor when we went out into the world. Like, I didn't talk about things that happened in acting class to civilians.
To normies.
Yeah, to normies. So I think that there's a bond in that. There's a vulnerability in it. And I'm so grateful to that, because it did inspire lifelong connections. And I think even the people I haven't seen in a long time, like I'm sure you feel the same way. If you saw them again, it's like family in a lot of ways. I mean, to me, it is very much so. It's the first time I really think I felt like I belonged no matter what. And I was a really shy, quiet kid. So having that was really important to me. It was like we were all on the same team all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I got to see other people in their vulnerable moments. I wasn't just sitting there feeling like I'm a vulnerable person in the world. But, you definitely noticed Duck right away. And his name's Duck.
And he's not exactly a wallflower. He didn't sit back quietly in the back row.
No, but also I think the thing I've noticed in listening to your podcast too is you're both good guys. I've been really interested in this concept of being like true-hearted, and I can tell that both of you are, it's obvious, it comes across. And so I think even when I was super quiet and didn't talk to anybody, I still had an affection for Doc right away, and watching him perform is such a gift. And so I'm grateful for you. I'm really happy that fate put us in that class.
That Monday morning, 9
First thing way too early in the morning to be taking an acting class.
Well, that's the profundity that I have come to expect from you. I knew you would be able to put that in a beautiful perspective. That experience of how we met. And we're jumping around and we're jumping ahead, but you were only at Ithaca for a short time, and we lost touch like people do. And then, like so many other people, we started to reconnect during COVID and during, on an online presence where I kind of kept track of Allie's career and saw that she was becoming an author and she was having success as an author, and it was so wonderful. And then I don't even know what kind of spurned it. Oh, I know what it was. You were playing guitar on Instagram, and I said that we should try to do a duet where you would record your part and I would record my part separately, and I would edit them together. And let me tell you, we failed spectacularly. We never did it, but it's
that
still...
was all on me.
No, it was me too. But it was what we needed, during COVID, where we needed some connection with the outside world. And we became close, and now we share our art with each other on a regular basis. She's a wonderful sounding board for me, where I'll send her like I said, my horrible attempts at fiction writing, or some of my songs, and she'll send me stuff that she's written and gives me the great honor of asking my opinion on it and giving her feedback and stuff. And it's such a nurturing, and it feeds my soul, our friendship, Allie, because it's so sweet and it's so pure about love and emotion, but we also make dumb dick jokes, and we also share, and we also, like I said, really connect over each other's art. And I value your friendship so much. It fills such a need in my life. So thank you.
Oh, well, you do too. I mean, it's such a gift to be your friend. I'm not gonna sit here and let you say that your fiction's not good, because Ithaca is an incredible writer, so I'm not letting that go.
It's fictional.
But I think it's hard to find people who understand you and understand your work and understand your intentions. And there's something about the fact that we have that context for each other for such a long period of time, that we had the desire to be at the same place at the same time, I think was self-filtering to some extent. But also, just, I think as a creative person, it's really important to find people you trust, that you trust their intelligence, that you trust their heart, that you trust their intentions. And I'm so thankful to you, Duck, for that, because I feel like you have my back. I'm always excited to see your art and to hear what you're thinking about and your perspective on things. And the times when I've just needed a good solid piece of advice, and you've been there. And also, I mean, there's no better feedback on a manuscript than somebody who's been studying character as an actor for a really long time. So, being able to share my work with Duck before I can send it to anyone else is super important. And I really do just feel blessed. I was only at Ithaca for 2 years, and it changed the entire course of my life in the best possible way. And I think that's a testament to the fact that, when I left college, I mean, we're probably getting ahead of ourselves, but when I left college, I had just been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and was really floundering. And so I left, and it felt like a failure. And now when I look back on it, I look at that was what I needed when I needed it. And it set me up for success for a really long time. Like, I didn't know I wanted to be a writer back then, but I knew I liked studying characters. I knew I liked being around creative people. I knew I was really interested in story. And I think I got everything I needed in those 2 years. I wish it could have been 4 years looking back. Now I'm like, oh man, wouldn't you just stay in college forever, you know? But it wasn't a failure. I think it was actually a great success. And, you know, and it helps to still have that be a part of my life, you know, that we're friends helps a lot, you know, to look at like, wow, that was a good experience. We were really lucky. We had really good professors too.
Well, it's a good transition to talk a little bit, and there is no agenda, so it doesn't matter if we're skipping ahead. One of the things that we connect over is the understanding of the effect that a group of people, a time in your life, a place can have on your development, in your life, etc. One of your wonderful books is set in Ithaca, and it's a testament to the impact that time and place had on your life. And I'm curious, after you left Ithaca, and you were there for only 2 years, where did you go next? Talk about the sort of process of becoming a writer after that experience, and what was it about those 2 short years in Ithaca that made such an impact that it became a central figure in one of your books?
Well, so I grew up in Somers, New York, which is where my next book takes place, which is outside of New York City, and had undiagnosed attention deficit disorder. I have now written 5 books, but I almost failed high school English. And I went to an art camp as a kid and studied. Also, it was a multi-art camp. It was Northern Westchester Center for the Arts, and we did like pottery and painting. And I actually hated the creative writing. It wasn't messy enough for me, you know.
Boy, the universe really tried to not let you be a writer, didn't it?
Really tried to not. I was always a really big reader. Like, I read everything I could get my hands on. But, you know, I did really well in school. It's the typical ADHD story. I did really well in school until we got to junior high school. And then everything started falling apart. And of course, I was a girl in the 90s. They weren't going to diagnose me with ADHD at that point. And so I went to college because I knew I could do theater. Like, I knew that I could do that because I'd done it. And that was the only thing I thought I could do, because I'd spent my high school years being told I wasn't very bright. Like, I had teachers tell me to my face that I was spacey, that I wasn't very smart. If I did well, that I must have cheated.
I want to encourage you to tell a story about the teacher X. Is it Professor X?
Oh, Mrs. X, yes.
Yeah.
My high school English teacher sophomore year accused me of cheating on a test of Mice and Men because I got all the answers right and the bonus question right, because I loved John Steinbeck and I'd read that book already. And then I didn't read most of the books we were supposed to read for school, but I was in a Steinbeck phase. So I read it. I'd already read it. I read it again. I remembered every single detail about it. So I got all of the answers right. And I got accused of cheating on that test because Mrs. X, I call her that, thought I wasn't bright enough to get those answers right. And so when I started selling books, and I'd find out that I sold a book in, a copy of Stay in Germany, like the rights sold in Germany, or things like that, I would shout her actual name, but I would shout, Mrs. X can suck it. And then I wrote an essay about that at one point on a blog I used to have. And so sometimes even still people will ask me to sign Mrs. X can suck it in my books when I do readings, which is pretty great. But, so I went into college not trusting myself. I felt inconsistent. I felt like I let myself down all the time. And I didn't think I could do anything else. And then, you go to a school with a professional theater program and you watch these people who are there because they love theater so much. And I was there because I thought I could do theater and I couldn't do anything else. And there were so many things I loved about it. I did a bunch of student films. I loved working with people. I loved the characters, all of that. I loved acting classes.
You got to kiss people, for crying out loud.
I got to kiss people for my midterms, But once I found out that I had ADHD, I also found out that I'm really smart and that there were ways my brain was working that I didn't understand. And honestly, you would think that opened up the world for me, but I just felt really lost and confused, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I dropped out. I thought still maybe acting, but I felt like maybe I needed to see what that was actually like and if I wanted it. I went to Strasbourg for like a week in New York City. uh, I went on a bunch of auditions and for commercials and things like that. And just everything about it was overwhelming to me. And somehow I ended up in New Jersey going to bartending school. I worked at a little Italian restaurant for a while. I worked at a biker bar for a while. But I ended up in a really abusive relationship that kind of knocked me off my feet and is eventually what sent me back to school, partly to get away because you know, my life had been threatened, so I needed to get out of Dodge to some extent. But also just because I was finally ready to kind of pull myself together. So I went to school in Rochester, New York, and took, I was going to go to school for public relations, but I took a script writing class and I was like, I think I'm just doing this for, writing speeches. That's what I'm doing. If you have to write a speech for somebody, I'm not going to be a creative person. I tried to be this creative person and my whole life fell apart. So one of my teachers told me I was good at writing. And then I took an essay writing class because I thought, well, that's good for PR too. And another one of my professors told me, you're kind of good at this writing thing. And because I have ADHD and I blurt things sometimes, I told him to shut up. I was like, shut up, don't say that, don't tell me that. But I started writing a short story that turned into my first novel when I was in college and I graduated. I graduated summa cum laude, which, for someone who barely graduated high school and dropped out of college and had a whole bunch of false starts, I learned how to learn finally.
Were you, sorry to interrupt you, had you found ways and or medication to help deal with the ADD at that point, which was what allowed you to really focus on that as academics? Or was it more that you just found your thing and it was easy to stay focused on it?
I think it was both because I really enjoyed the academics when I went back to school. Like I took a class called the biology of cancer and I loved it. Like I learned so much.
Dark.
I loved the professor. Yeah, it wasn't like a cheerful class.
Yeah, right.
But I had an understanding of what I needed to do to learn now. And oddly, I learned that going to bartending school because, I've always been like kind of if I can focus on something, I want to do it well. And I was so nervous about bartending school that I studied really hard. I still have like my box of
Your
drink cards
mixology.
over in the corner of,
Your
because I made
certificate.
myself flashcards and I studied really hard and that taught me how to study. I was like the best bartender in bartending school. And I think it just taught me that I could do that. So that was really important. I have taken ADHD medication like on and off. I did start taking it when I was at Ithaca. Man, when you are someone with attention deficit disorder who's been used to existing in a world of people who are like shaking their faces out and making sounds with movements and doing all these weird exercises, and then all of a sudden you take this medication that makes your brain very linear, and you're in that room and you're like, I can't, what is this? This is I'm not wired this way at this moment.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing. And, I do think that ADHD medication is really helpful. The thing that frustrates me personally about it, I know some people, everybody needs to figure out their own path with that. What frustrates me about ADHD medication is that usually I need it at the intersection of me and the neurotypical world.
What do you mean by that?
If I have to pay my taxes, if I have to be at a certain place at a certain time, if I have to, focus on things that I don't like doing, because, ADHD is like an interest-based nervous system. If I'm interested in something, I'll write for days without talking to another person and not really notice. My husband will go on a climbing trip and I just like get weird. I don't talk to people. I just write. I forget to eat. I might not bathe for 3 days, and I get a lot of work done and I'm super happy doing it. It's when I have to do things that were designed in a way that don't work for my brain that I feel like I have a disability. And that's when medication is incredibly helpful. So it's an interesting thing. I'm thankful for it, but I've also realized that I don't need it all the time. But also I just kind of wish the world, especially the world that revolves around creative people, was set up for creative minds a little bit better.
That's a really interesting way of describing and helpful way of describing that phenomenon, because I think I've been probably guilty, even as a therapist, of misunderstanding ADHD and some of its symptoms, because that is confusing to me, that there is this inability in certain respects to focus or to not sort of procrastinate or let things pile up or to be able to sort of execute in a linear way, right? And then at the same time, there's this proclivity to sort of get absorbed with something and be hyper-focused on one thing for long periods of time. And that always just seemed counterintuitive to me. Like, how could those two things fit together? And I think the way that you just described that was really helpful, because I can relate to that. And I don't know, maybe I have a little bit of it myself, but there are times in my life as a creative person, when I go to that creative space, that I go into another zone. And I've thought of it and referred to it as flow. It's just, I'm so connected to something that time kind of has no meaning, and I forget to eat. And it's just, when I was working on my book, that's the way that it was. And I can relate to that being in the studio. There's long hours. And I thought my sort of clock was just not, it was musician time. That's what we referred to. It's like, you think you're working, and then all of a sudden at 3 a.m, you really click in, and then you are up all night. And it's like, people that don't have that creative streak, and maybe it is a certain kind of neurodiversity in the brain that creates it, but people that don't have that can't really relate to it. They don't really understand going to that place where you're sort of untethered to a certain extent from the linear way of thinking about time and about connection to whatever you're trying to focus on. And I think the opposite is true too. When you're in that space, you don't understand how people can be so tethered to a linear way of thinking. But I'm usually like that. Like, as a person, I have a very probably over-organized mind. I'm like constantly trying to put things in order and do things in a linear way. I have to-do lists for my to-do lists. So it's very rare that I'm able to tap into that. But it gives me actually a little bit more understanding and more respect for people who, especially creative people that are ADHD or neurodivergent in other ways. It's also interesting to me because we have a similar sort of redemption story in terms of writing. And I had a teacher in high school that was pretty cruel, actually. And really, I was literally failing out of 9th grade honors English. And that was the first time that I ever didn't do well in a class, and I was literally almost failing. And it took me the rest of my high school time to regain the passion for writing that I had as a kid. And I, by the way, always dreamt of being a fiction novelist. So you are I think the first fiction novelist that we've had on this show. And so it's very exciting to pick your brain in terms of this process. I've written a memoir, but I still have that dream. But anyway, the redemption story was I ended up getting a degree in English at UCLA, and I ended up 20 years later writing a book. And that was so fulfilling for me. So I'm curious for you, having gone through this whole, different areas of feeling really empowered and then feeling really like people are telling me I'm not smart. I don't feel like I'm smart. And then ending up in this place where you now are not just able to create things, but actually getting the feedback from people. It's a bestseller. It's something that people can relate to. The stories I'm telling, the character arcs that I'm describing in my books are resonating with people. What does that feel like?
It's really very healing. I also want to say I was very aware when listening to your book that we had that parallel, and I was like cheering for you when you were talking about your English teacher in the book. I was like, yeah, your Mrs. X can suck it too.
Suck it, Mrs. X.
Yeah. So, but it is amazing. It also, I think the struggles that I had set me up to struggle well moving forward. because I wrote 3 novels as Allie Larkin, and around the same time that I was working on my first book, I started working on a short story that eventually became The People We Keep, that was published as Allison Larkin. And I spent 15 years fighting for that book. My first book had a dog, and I'm very proud of my Allie Larkin books. I love them, but they fit in a box very neatly. You know, they're upmarket women's fiction, kind of fall into the rom-com category. You know how to categorize them. And then I was also writing this book about a 16-year-old car thief folk singer who hits the road and lives in a world of adults and has kind of a rough time. She grew up in a motorless motorhome. And so that's a lot different from the other stuff I was writing. And so my first agent told me to stop writing it. My second agent wanted me to write it as a young adult book and maybe make it more of a rom-com. And, you know, it took me 15 years and 5 agents. I at some points it was shopped, and I had editors say, like, well, what if she stayed in one place and had friends her own age? You know, pre-Me Too, people kept telling me that my main character needed to be nicer as a young woman. I don't know that I could have sold that book until after we stopped talking about that.
Could she smile more? Could we have her smile
Yeah, exactly.
more? She'd be so pretty if she smiled.
I also got told that there was both too much and not enough sex in the book.
Huh.
Which was an interesting one, that my main character was too promiscuous, but then another person said like it wasn't a sexy book and it should be. Yeah, it was a lot of that. And I sometimes tried to take that advice and write the book the way that it should be, because someone would say to me, if you do this, I'll be able to sell it. And then I would do that, and I'd feel like I betrayed my heart, and they still couldn't sell my book. But I think the fact that there's this really beautiful song by Jeffrey Foucault that says, "You've got a heart like a hurricane lamp," which I think is like just one of the most beautiful things ever. If you think about a hurricane lamp with that little flame inside this glass jar. And I think that growing up the way I did, because I had a hard time at home too, and then I had a hard time in school, and then I had a hard time when I dropped out of school. I don't expect to be comfortable. I don't expect to, you know, I've had this little flame that's kept me going. And I felt like my main character had this little flame that kept her going. And even when I couldn't fight for myself, I figured out how to fight for her. And once I started fighting for her, I think I finally learned how to trust myself. I think I finally learned how to honor the fact that like I've had this little light that keeps going. And so that's been an incredible experience. I really wish that I'd gone to grade school and somebody said, "Oh, sweetheart, you have ADHD and you're very smart, and here's what you're going to need to do with your life." And I wish that I'd gone to college and, you know, had a great college time. And I wish that my work had been understood immediately in the industry. And then also, I don't wish any of that, because I'm here right now talking to you because I thought the only thing I was good at was acting. And I wouldn't know duck otherwise. And I wouldn't probably have ever written a book if I hadn't had that struggle, you know? So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I strayed from the point of what we were talking about.
Not at all.
But I think that it's all been really hard won. At a certain point, I just had to double down on myself. I just had to say, you know, with The People We Keep, I hit a breaking point. Somebody I was working with told me, kept trying to make one of the male characters a very perfect person, and he was a very flawed character. And I just kind of hit a breaking point. Decided I was going to just finish the book for myself. It was just for me. If my niece someday was like, "Oh, I didn't know she wrote another book," that would be fine. You know, I made it mine in the most perfect way possible. And that's the book that went out into the world. And that's the thing that makes me feel whole in a way I never have before. Mm-hmm. Because when people are reading that book and they understand it and it means something to me, it's coming from my heart in such a specific way. And that's the gift of all of this. You know, Anne Lamott, who wrote Bird by Bird, has a quote in that book where she talks about how publishing is never satisfying. It's the writing part that is. Publishing is frustrating, writing is good. I think you can add to that connecting with readers is good, connecting to people with your art is good. And I think that having had the experience of fighting for myself, and every single word and comma in that book is the way I want it to be, and finally having people say, yes, I understand you too. I mean, that's the biggest gift of my life. It's amazing. I think it also, listening to this podcast has felt like such a gift. I mean, I think you have a spectacular podcast, but the opportunity to hear one of your dear friends talk about his innermost thoughts and feelings on a weekly basis is such a gift. And I've realized that people who know me through my books or know me separately and then read my books know my heart and in a way that they might not otherwise. And I feel like that's a really big gift too.
I love the concept of that hard won journey, like you talk about. I mean, it's a theme we always hit here, is that, like, yeah, it's been a tough road, but you couldn't trade it, because look where it's led us. My struggles with anxiety, Ryan's struggles with substances, all of it. It literally puts us right here. I wouldn't be on this podcast with Ryan if I didn't have those fears and those things that kind of dictated my life for my 20s. And it was a horrible time, and I wouldn't want to go back to it, but I also wouldn't want to change it, because look where I am and look what we're creating now. So it's such an important message to re-amplify, that the hard times that you're going through are necessary to become the person that you're going to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years.
And it makes you kinder, I think that's the big thing. It's like when you've fallen flat on your face, you understand that other people do too. You understand that other people are afraid of falling too. You understand so much about the world that you might not otherwise. And I'm kinder to myself, and I'm kinder to other people because of that. Like, one of the things about ADHD, to go back to what you were saying, Ryan, about they can't focus and then they can focus so clearly, that makes you look like an inconsistent person in the world. That means that you let some people down because they don't understand why you can't do that one thing, but you're focusing so hard on that other thing. I mean, I've had doctors say to me, you can't have ADHD, you write novels. And it's like, no, right. I write novels because I have ADHD. But it makes the letdown that happens when your brain works like that, the letdown other people feel, is true to them. It's valid. It's fair. And you understand that. And you have the frustration of, like, I should have done this thing. It fell through the cracks. And so you stop trusting yourself. And one of the things going through everything that I've gone through and getting to this point is that I realized that I can trust myself to always have good intentions, and that I can work harder on the other parts of it. And I think that, with anxiety, with addiction, all those things, it's like one of the crippling things about it is the way that you lose trust in yourself. But I think when you gain it, it's real. When you gain it and you understand it, and you understand why you fell and how you picked yourself back up, and know that if you do fall again, you can pick yourself back up, you gain a level of trust.
It's like a broken bone that heals, and then there's scar tissue there that makes it tougher, because now you know how to handle it, you know how to overcome it, you know how to not make the same mistake twice. So there's benefit to it.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important that you're talking about mental health, that you're talking about struggles, because I know the times in my life that were the hardest were when I was trying very hard to pretend that I was perfect on the outside, instead of just saying, like, no, this is me. And I think a lot of the problems that we have in the world are people not feeling comfortable being vulnerable, because it's not safe for them to be vulnerable. So we need safe spaces for that.
Hopefully this is a safe space.
I relate to so much, everything that you're saying. And it's amazing for me to think, when people ask me, like, what was the most exciting or most fulfilling thing you got to do in your life? Usually they're expecting something from my being in Maroon 5 and, some of the incredible moments that we had winning a Grammy Award or playing on Saturday Night Live or something like that. And I always say writing my book, and I'm not talking about publishing it or getting a positive review. Writing my book was the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. And it's the thing that I'm most proud of. And when I think of it in this way, as you're speaking, it's like I always had a dream of writing a book. The book that I eventually got to write that was so fulfilling never would have come to be had it not been for all the things that I had to struggle through. It was the impetus for the thing that ultimately was the most fulfilling thing in my life. And not just that, but it was also the best therapy I've ever had in my life. The process of writing a story, and it happened to be my actual story that I was working through. And of course, there's going to be some therapeutic process to that. But it sounds like your characters are that for you. When you were describing fighting for your characters, it was like very easy to see fighting for your characters was a way that you were fighting for yourself. And that, creating these stories that may in some ways be based on your experiences, but are fictional characters is a way for you to work through some of the things that have been difficult for you. Would you say that that's the case?
Absolutely. I didn't grow up like April from The People We Keep. I grew up in a house outside of New York City. I did not grow up in a motorless motorhome. I was not a traveling folk singer, but I always say that
Yet.
It's kind of my,
Yeah.
that's like my 50s. When I get into
Yeah,
my
yeah.
50s, I'm going to steal a car and hit the
Perfect.
road.
I have a car. Steal a car.
Yeah. But I think that I feel like that book is my life an allegory in a lot of ways. It's a lot of the themes I was dealing with. It's a lot of the loneliness that I felt, or the insecurities I felt, or the imperfect connections that I had with people in my life, and what I wished they were versus what they actually were. And I think that I remember feeling that when I finished the first draft of that book, I felt like a different person. Like I'm kind of guessing you felt like that when you finished your book, Ryan. Like, I just felt like I'd put something down that I'd been carrying for a very long time. And the book that I just finished that's coming out in 2025, I felt like that again. It was like the next level of it, And it's really freeing. It's really nourishing. I think it gives you the chance to make sense of your life. It also gives you a purpose for the pain that you've gone through. That's the palette I have to paint from. And I'm glad that I had those experiences to some extent, because it gave me something to write about. It gave me something to make sense of. I think also it gives you the urge to make sense of it. You want things to be for something. You don't want to just struggle and have it not amount to anything.
I actually, it's a good segue because I want to talk specifically about that book and your previous 3 books and the kind of the dichotomy of the two. The one of the main themes in The People We Keep is the concept of chosen family. That we're not always blessed with the best families. Sometimes parents can be hurtful and siblings can be distant, and people, just because you're related doesn't mean that you are obligated to love and respect and listen. And the people who we choose to have in our lives, the people who see our hearts and the people who connect with us are oftentimes our true families. Those are the ones who see us for who we are, support us unconditionally. And I'm curious about, if you're comfortable talking about it, your experience with that, with your family versus the people that you choose to have in your life, whether it's a partner, friends, artists that you surround yourself with, and the comfort that you take in that, and how you put that into the book.
I haven't really talked about it publicly, but I feel like if I'm gonna talk about it, looking at my friend's beautiful face here is helpful. I've been estranged from my family for over 20 years, and from my family of origin. I didn't fit in the family I was born into. I didn't fit. It didn't work for me. It hurt me. And when I was finally able to let go of that, I was finally able to have the relationships that I needed in my life in a way where I could begin to trust myself, where I could begin to believe my intentions. I think I was a really misunderstood child. And so things that people said about me or to me didn't coincide with how I felt inside. And that cognitive dissonance is really, really damaging. And it wasn't something that I could heal until I stepped away to take care of myself. But once I did that, I realized that I had the space to really love the people I love. And I didn't before, because I was always just trying to like be good enough to not provoke reactions, to not provoke hurt. And so once I let go of that, I could be a better human being. I could show up for people. I had time and space and energy to realize that I've always had good friends and that mattered. I've always had good teachers in my life. I had terrible teachers in my life too, but I had some really good teachers in my life. I had
Suck it, Mrs.
art
X.
teachers. Yeah, Mrs. X can suck it. You know, I had art and music teachers who pulled me together. I had people I worked with when I was younger. When I was a bartender, my boss in the Italian restaurant where I worked would walk by the bar and smack a guy upside the head because he didn't like the way he was looking at me. and, and even that like healed something a little bit in my life. Not that anyone should hit anyone ever, but that, you know, there were people who were going to protect me in my life, that there were people who, you know, loved me because they wanted to. That's a really powerful thing. That's such a powerful thing, you know? So everything good in my life came because I chose myself, and I chose my husband, and I chose my friends, and I keep choosing them. And I realized actually last night, Doug and I were texting about setup for this, you know, and I had talked to some of my other friends over the past couple of days, and I realized like I have so much love in my life because I made space for it, and that's valid. And that is something that I didn't realize when I started writing books that are every single one of them is about found family. All 5 of my books are about found family, and I didn't realize that I was doing that for the first couple books. And then I did, and I leaned into it. And I have heard so many stories from other people about their found families and about the validity of that. And I think that that's a very important thing. I actually just heard our vice president on a podcast talking about there's the family you're born into and the family that you make for yourself. And I thought, wow, we're coming a long way with that, because people who I chose to love, who chose to love me, changed my life. They changed who I am. Even in the context of the people we keep, when I was getting all this industry pushback for what my book was, the thing that kept me going was the friends who read it and said, no, I know what you're doing here. You're doing it. You're accomplishing it. It might not fit in their box, but it should exist. So I think all of my books are kind of a love story about that kind of friendship and that kind of family.
Yeah, my follow-up to that is going back to your previous 3 books, your Allie Larkin books, which you even say yourself, you know, they are pretty easily put into this category that we will call chick lit, which I find a pejorative. And I'm curious if you do as well, or if you embrace that message, because it obviously resonates with women because maybe they are not seeing themselves reflected in other styles of writing. So there's the fact that there's an entire genre that is, you know, categorized that actually speaks to women and tells the stories that they want to see reflected might be a positive thing. Did you ever push back against that concept of being like a chick lit author, or is it something you leaned into, or what?
Well, I mean, you know, we do all joke that like male fiction is dick lit, so there is that. I mean, there is something offensive about the fact that fiction about women is called women's fiction or chick lit instead of just fiction. I'm writing domestic fiction.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be called anything else. And you know, I mean, and now I'm writing more literary fiction, you know, that doesn't fit in that, but it still kind of gets categorized as women's fiction. I think on the one hand, if that's what needs to happen for women's stories to be told and for women to seek out those stories, that's good. But the other thing is that these are human stories. And we gain empathy through fiction. So men should be reading women's stories too. And the fact that women read books by men and men don't read books by women leaves us with a very large empathy gap that I think we're seeing in our current culture on a really huge level. So I think that when I've had men read my first book, Stay, and my other books, and been like, I really liked this book. I really identified with this character. And why can't we then give them a cover that makes them feel comfortable buying it? Because it also goes into men aren't encouraged to talk about their feelings or consider their feelings. It's kind of all tied into this misogyny to some extent, which I think is really frustrating because they're human stories. I think that's a big part of it.
I mean, it helped that I went to Ithaca College, but when I read The People We Keep, Allie and I, we talked so much about just like, I get it. You captured the feeling of being in that place with the people that we were there with. And it feels so personal to me that I feel very connected to that book. So much so that Allie sent me some People We Keep guitar picks, which I still keep right here next to me. So I am also a believer that the title of chick lit or women's fiction is silly, and if it resonates with you, it resonates with you, regardless of gender or gender identity, anything like that. So
yeah. Well, and to go back to, I think my brain's doing the thing of like circling back around. I think the reason that I wrote about Ithaca, when I talked about like where I came from and where I ended up, when I went to Ithaca, even though I still wasn't sure who I was yet, I felt like I belonged there in a really important way. And it's such an incredible place, both in the people who choose to be there and the landscape of the place. And so I think that was one of the reasons that was really important to me to capture that and write about it, because it is special.
Ryan, have you ever been
to Ithaca? No.
Yeah.
But I know so many people that went to Ithaca. Some of them, are the reason I know you. And then some of them are people that I've met through you. So it seems like this magical place, because everyone I've met from Ithaca has been just a fascinating and talented and unique individual. So it's really cool. But I love this concept of the people you choose and the communities that you create becoming family. I can certainly relate to that, and I'll describe how in a second, but I'll also say that there's also people like me that are just, deeply enmeshed with our family of origin.
Yeah, it's not, one isn't better than the other. It's just different.
No, but there's for me, I come not just from a family that's very close, but culturally, I think, from the background that I'm from. My mom's family is Latin American. My dad's family is Jewish. There's a tradition where everything is within the family, I think, in both of those cultures. And my parents, just as people individually, are people that family is everything to them, and they invest themselves in the people that are close to them. But I would say that growing up, when I say my family, I mean maybe a quarter of that were people I was actually blood related to. And the rest of them were extended family. They were people that were friends and friends of friends, and people that were like for instance, the Summers, who introduced me to you, Duck. They're Jolie and Jordan are like first cousins to me. Susie's
when you said that they weren't actually your cousin, I was surprised. I didn't know that they weren't really your cousins. I thought they were your family because you guys were so close. We basically spent every Thanksgiving and every Christmas and every family event. They were at my graduations. They were, and so I think that for both of my parents, who lost both of their parents young, creating that family was not just about who are the people that I'm blood related to, but who are the people that I care about, who do I value, and whom do I want to make important? Where do I create meaning in these relationships? And for me, I look, at moments in my life when I have felt that most, and I think about the band for a time. There was a time when they were my brothers. They were literally my brothers. Like, we were, in all the best and worst ways, we fought like brothers, we argued like brothers, we were connected and really, just had a shared experience like family. I think about the outpatient program that I went to and the AA group that we basically the same people every Wednesday night and every Saturday morning.
We had groups that we talked about the most intimate details of our lives in ways that I never had with friends, particular not with boys or men in my life.
These boys to men.
Or boys. You've made that joke before, Doug.
I'm never going to let it pass.
Well, I have to say boys or men because when I was a kid, it was boys. As an adult, it was men. No, I find it's funny. It just,
it's repetitive.
You throw me off my game when I'm in the middle of it.
Sorry. I won't do it next time, I promise.
No, but as a man, I'm finding this, I found it in circles of recovery, and I've found it as a therapist working with men, in circles with boys growing up. There was that a lack of connection on a more intimate level that you're describing. There was, because of the cultural sort of, stereotypes that, feelings are for girls and boys just go out and play and talk about sports and whatever. That was a large part of my relationships with boys growing up. And it was limiting because I was always connected more to my, let's call it feminine side, if that's what feelings and emotions are, is your feminine side. I just thought of it as, I'm a sensitive guy. Mm-hmm. As an adult, it was in those communities. It was in recovery, going to AA meetings and to this outpatient program. It's as a therapist, getting to know men on a more intimate level and understanding that their feelings and emotions, their basic needs and feelings are not that different than a woman's. Or any gender. It's just that we have different cultural ways in which they present. And some of them are, I'm sure, differences in terms of, our biology. But for the most part, it has to do with how those things present because of our cultural stereotypes and ways in which we're conditioned to relate. But I have found that those connections, those ones with chosen family, chosen community, have been some of the most worthwhile because it's you don't choose your blood family, but you do choose those people that you decide mean something really important to you.
And the connections that those people you make with those people are usually the things that you are the most passionate. Like you say,
right.
The guys in the band, music was, after baseball, music was your life.
Right.
And so, and then probably your teammates on your baseball team back in the day were similarly close because you shared a passion for something that was the most important thing in your life.
Except for in high school, they were dicks.
Yeah, screw those guys. Suck it, Team X.
Yeah.
But, I come from a relatively small family. And I think the reason that I search and yearn for those connections with the friendships that I have with you two, with the cast that I just left from the show, is because I do yearn for those connections that I see someone like you, Ryan, have with your family. And I long for that. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we are allowed as a society to have the freedom to say, if I'm not getting this from my blood family, I can find a community that does understand me and does believe in me, which leads me to one, because we're already so far into this interview. I want to get to all this great stuff. I want to ask you, Allie, about the True Hearts Collective, which is, I'll let you explain what it is because I will probably jumble it up and you'll say it in a beautiful flowery language. So you say, tell me about True Hearts Collective.
That's so much pressure now.
Yeah, do it. Go.
So when I was going through a lot of the issues with the people we keep, if I hadn't had that friend group to help me, I probably would have given up at a certain point because it wasn't reasonable to spend 15 years believing in a book I couldn't spell that people were telling me it should be different. But because I had friends who loved it and believed in it, I was able to keep going and stick up for my work, and that changed everything about me. Last year, when there was a lot of stuff going on in the world that was just devastating, I didn't really know how to respond to it. And I thought, well, I can raise money for World Central Kitchen. So within 2 seconds of having this thought, I put on Instagram that I was raising money for World Central Kitchen. I was going to donate $60 for every Zoom that I scheduled and ask the other person to donate $60 as well. And anyone who wanted to have coffee with me over Zoom could sign up. And I thought, I'll do a couple, and I forget how many I did. I thought maybe 5 people would want to do this. I really didn't think it was going to be that many, and I think it was like 30. I ended up having all these Zooms, and we donated a whole bunch of money, and it was really great. And in the course of having those conversations, most of what people wanted to talk to me about was their creative work. They wanted to talk to me about self-doubt. They wanted to talk to me about, how do I know if I'm good enough? They wanted to talk about, I keep getting rejected. What does that mean? How do I, it wasn't even the stereotypical, I'm sure, Ryan, you've had this of like, well, so you're a musician. How do I be famous? Like, how do I make that happen? It wasn't that.
This is my demo.
The question, yeah, exactly. Doug, how do you get in commercials? Can you get me in commercials?
Sure.
It wasn't that. It was very much like, I have this story in my heart, or I have this art in my heart, and I'm scared to get it out. I feel like, what if it's not good enough? And as I'm talking to all these people, I'm realizing that they need to know each other. That's what needs to happen. So after those conversations, I just started thinking like, well, how could I get them together? How could this work? So I started the True Hearts Collective, and we do Zoom meetings every month. We have an unrecorded Zoom meeting that just goes out into the ether like it never happened. So if somebody needs to come and talk about something very personal, we're there and it goes away. We have a recorded one where we talk about, different topics. I think this month's topic is how the F do you believe in yourself? And we have an artist come and talk every month, and Duck was our inaugural artist to come talk with the group about being an actor. And we have a book and film club where we discuss films and movies so that we're connecting with art in different ways, which has been really fascinating. And it's the best thing I've ever done. It really is. It's taking people who have had those Mrs. X's in their lives and saying, tell her to suck it. Like, who cares? That's not what art is.
I think we know what the title of this podcast episode is going to have to be.
Mrs. X can suck
Mrs.
it.
X can suck it without her.
That'll be a search engine optimization.
Right? Absolutely. People will jump on.
You might get some interesting fans there.
Right. Yeah, there's some crossover.
Yeah. But I've been for a very long time really interested in the concept of true-hearted. Like when I was starting to question who I was as an artist and what I should do with my work, I realized that absolutely all the art that I love, everything from like punk music to movies to books to, just people. If I had to think of a word that encompassed that, it was true-hearted. It was, Samwise from The Lord of the Rings jumping into the river to save Frodo when he doesn't know how to swim. Like that is my spokesperson.
Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah.
I'm a novelist. Like I'm a professional nerd. But that I think is I started calling that true-hearted, and I thought, when I was looking for a name up for the group, that I would call it the True Hearts Collective. And one of the magic things about that is that the people who show up get it immediately. It's a little cheesy, and that works. Like you're on board for that when you show up. And we are this really great, close-knit already group of people who show up and support each other. I think the greatest joy in all of this is seeing people someone I know from high school supporting someone who knows me from my books and came into the group, that they're interacting with each other in such a beautiful way, and they're forming their own sense of community.
I'm Instagram friends with some of the people who were in our episode, and I love seeing them working on their novels and things like it's great. I love it.
They're such a great group of people, like you always hear all these things about the internet and the horrors of the internet. This bright little corner of the internet that I get to exist in is so wonderful. I mean, it's book people mostly, it's creative people mostly, and it's just such a gift. They are incredible human beings that I got to meet because I had this idea and didn't second guess myself and just went through with it. And it's been really beautiful. I know, Ryan, you've talked a lot about how helping other people in addiction recovery and in mental health was a healing thing for you. And I feel like being able to take what I've learned in my creative journey and help other people feel supported, and even just give them a place when things are going badly, to say, like, yeah, we get it. We're here for you. Like, one of the things that I think happens with creative people is you a lot of times only see other creative people in their success. And a lot of times, I think culturally, we felt like when we're successful, we have to pretend it just came naturally, or that there weren't pitfalls, or that, it's like we're just smooth sailing. We're just always so naturally talented that it was just always going to happen for us. And, so to be able to, one time I brought all my rejection letters for the people we keep and read them out loud to people,
Nice.
It was like just people knowing that, like, failure happens, and that you have to figure out what your art means to you and stick up for that. And that doesn't mean it's ever going to get published, but are you okay with that? That you can make certain decisions about your art instead of just this like upward trajectory you're supposed to have. And if you're not doing that, you're failing. And it's been really healing for me. It's another thing where the things I went through were for something. But also, it's what you were talking about, Doc. It's building that family. It's getting to commune with other creative people, and I think that's the greatest purpose in my life, honestly.
Well, I know our listeners are already going to want to reach out and find out how they can be a part of it. So how do people find True Arts Collective, and how can they join up?
It is on Patreon right now, and all the videos that we have are behind the paywall. It's not an expensive group to be a part of, but it's behind the paywall just to keep it so that people feel comfortable sharing. But yeah, it's Patreon. It's Allie Larkin Writes on Patreon.
In the intro, Duck, you used one word to describe Allie, and that was pure. And that really shines through. I mean, I love having somebody like you on the show because, and we've only had a couple. I mean, the other person that leaps to mind that has a similar feel in terms of that just pure intention was Kalina Silverman. Her episode just came out recently. We've had a lot of coaches who are helping people, and I as you said, I profess service as a way to not just be helpful to others, but to help yourself, to get out of self, to be of service is a way that it's empowering, and it gives you self-esteem and purpose. But a lot of people that I see in that world, and there's no knock on wanting to make a buck and have a business, but it comes from a place of like, sign up for my seminar, sign up for my program, and it's big business. But every now and then, it's like when Kalina was on, we were like, so what's the deal with this company you started? Like, you're not trying to make money. You're just trying to help people. You're just trying to connect with people because it's meaningful to you. And I get the sense with this collective and a lot of the things you're talking about, it's the primary purpose is so pure. It's coming from this place of something that's meaningful to you. You wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't meaningful to you, and it's important to you to be of service to others in that way. And I have to remember that. That's the takeaway from this episode for me, is like, even if you're out there, look, you're an author. I'm sure you want to sell books. I'm sure you want to do things that allow you to continue to have a career in this business. But at the core of it, there's that function of, what is the purpose of this? Like, what is my purpose as a human being? What is the purpose of the career that I've chosen and the path that I've chosen? And to witness somebody talking about it in such a pure way, where your intentions are, just geared in that way, it is inspiring, and it does remind me of what is important along that journey.
Now you see what I get out of this relationship with Allie. It's like, just anytime I need a hit of like pure love and positivity, I can just say, hey, what's going on? And she'll be like, you're a beautiful person who has talent and you are valued. And I'm like, I feel great,
I mean it too.
Yeah.
I think that's a part of harnessing ADHD correctly too, is that when I have that purpose, I have boundless energy. I have boundless interest. And, if I don't see the purpose of it, and I don't see the purpose in fighting for numbers, I don't see the purpose in, I know I need to make a living, I know, but in terms of just fighting for membership numbers or fighting for anything, that's not going to motivate me. So I always have to find what does, because, you can't take it with you. And I just want to have nice days with nice people and feel like my life matters,
That being said, I'd stepped on Ryan's attempt to let you hype up your next book. So tell us about the next book and when it's coming out and everything like that.
Oh yes, yeah. My next novel is called Home of the American Circus. I grew up in Somers, New York, which is where Haggalea Bailey brought the first circus elephant to the United States. And the book has a little bit of a backdrop of that history in it, but it takes place in 2007. It's coming out on May 6th, 2025, and I'm very excited about it.
You can pre-order now, right? On Amazon?
Yes, you can pre-order now wherever books are sold.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Real quick, Ryan, before you, I can feel a wrap-up coming. But I want to try something. Speaking of Kalina Silverman, who was a wonderful guest who has her concept of Big Talk, which was a card game that she developed to help people kind of get past small talk and really talk about big things. I wanted to try something new, and I figured you were the perfect guest to try this with. This is called the Harder to Breathe Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you a series of quick questions, and you're only allowed quick little answers. It can't be, we're not going to go on because we've already taken too much of your time. But so whatever these questions mean to you, I want to hear your instinctive reaction answers. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Number one, what scares you the most? Could be spiders, could be writing, could be anything. Well,
one time I went trail running and I almost ran into a wild hog, and it was terrifying.
Okay. Beautiful. If you found out today that you had 1 year to live, what would you do with that year?
I don't think I'd do that much differently. I think I would try to see as many of my friends as I possibly could, and I'd still get up and walk my dog and play guitar and write, maybe without worrying about finishing it, just to enjoy the things I love the most.
I love it. If you weren't a writer, what would you be doing?
I think if I'd found out about my attention deficit disorder earlier, I was very interested in science, and I think I might have gone into some sort of like biology type field.
Nice. Okay, last one. And this one's a little heavy, so it's okay if you take some time with this one. If you could go back in time and right one wrong that you did, that you maybe wronged somebody, what would that be? How would you do it? Or would you do it? Maybe you wouldn't. Like we've
I don't
talked
believe
about.
that she ever wronged anyone. Come on, let's get honest.
I agree. Well, I was going to ask if someone wronged you, like if someone from your past could come back and tell you they were sorry. But I think it's more interesting to find out what you would do.
You know, I think everybody's wronged people. I think that's the whole thing about being human, is that especially being a young human, because you're trying to figure your life out in the parameters of yourself when everybody else is too. So I know that there's things that I did or said or didn't do or didn't say that hurt people in the past. It's a hard question.
That's the point.
Yeah.
I wanted to dig deep.
I think I wish that I'd had the capacity to show up for people more when I was younger, that I hadn't carried shame around, and that I could have been a better friend as a younger person to absolutely all of my friends. You know, I kind of kept distance there, and I don't know that that's necessarily wronging anyone or that I could have done better. You know, I'm also estranged from my family, and that needed to happen, and that's everything that needed to happen. I also know that I hurt people in saving myself, and I wish that those things didn't have to go together. I wish that I could have just lifted myself away and erased memories and not had any pain. I know that there's pain involved in that, but I needed to survive, so I did that. And I don't know that I could go back and change something without everything else changing. It's the butterfly effect.
That's sort of the point of the question, is that I want people to realize that the flaws and you know the mistakes that we make are part of who we are now, but I couldn't think of a better answer from you. I mean, it's just an encapsulation of your kind of selfless nature, that you would go back and try to make things easier for other people. You know, I mean, I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and I love it. So thank you. Thank you for being our inaugural lightning round contestant.
That's exciting.
Can I add one question to your lightning round, Doug? Because I'm curious. It is so empowering to think of you coming from where you were at a certain point and finding the strength to fight for yourself in those ways, even if there were casualties that, you know, went with that process for you. What would you, if you could go back and talk to yourself before you were empowered, before you were able to fight for yourself, when you believed the negative things and you were struggling, what would you tell yourself?
It's interesting. I had a therapist who told me to think about what age my feelings are all the time and then talk to that child at that age. And I have a picture of myself at 9 years old on my bulletin board over there. And I'm
Oh,
always like,
wow.
oh, kiddo, you're okay. You're going to be okay. So, yeah, I think, getting me choked up here.
Yeah.
I think I wish I could go back and tell that kid that, she was smart and creative and fierce and, that it would be okay, that someday she'd write a book like all those books she was reading. I think, there's that meme about like that child self would be proud of, like my child self would be like, holy crap, but have no concept of the fact that I could be me now. I had no concept of any of that at that age. And I wish that I could have given her a little bit of hope. I wish I could do that because I think there was a lot of time in my life where I didn't feel like I had value and I made decisions from that place, and again, like I said, I don't regret where it brought me, but man, it was painful. And
Yeah.
if I look at that kid on my bulletin board, I don't want her to hurt,
It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this has just been such a lovely conversation. Thank you so much, Allie, for appearing on the show and for just being what I get the sense is the way you always are, just very honest and pure. And
thank you for being such a strong supporter of this podcast. You were an early listener, an early adopter. You have been singing our praises on social media from the beginning. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for that too.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's so great to get to talk with both of you, and it's so great to listen to your podcast. Like, it's one thing that, my friend Duck's on this podcast and it's great to listen to, but I think I would listen even if I didn't know Duck. I think
And now
it's
your friend
such a great
Ryan's on the podcast too.
Now my friend Ryan too. I know. I was so excited to talk with you, Ryan, because I was like, well, you love Duck, so here we go. We're friends already.
we have something in common right off the bat. So
Exactly. And I did love your book so much.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's meaningful to me on another level, because again, my passion and my dream was always to write a novel, and probably at some point in my life I will get around to writing a novel. But to hear somebody who has lived that dream and done it successfully and in a very pure way, that's getting praise from somebody like you on something that I created is more meaningful than it would be for somebody else who hasn't had the experience that you've had. So thank you.
It was a joy to read, and let me know if you need help with that novel.
Absolutely. I guess we're gonna close out the show here. I think that if everything goes according to plan, this is going to be the second to last episode of season 1 in December. So I want to hype up a little bit. The last episode of season 1 is going to be an end of year special that Duck and I have yet to shoot, but I have no doubt it's going to be something special.
All the bells and whistles.
Yeah, I mean, it's been just such a fulfilling run. It's been I guess it'll be like a half year, the first season 1, and then we'll start season 2 in January. So there's so much to just kind of reflect on about this journey so far, and just the year that's coming to an end.
We'll have a new president at that point.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Yeah. Let's stay in the positive.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But for now, it's been just so enlightening and fulfilling to have a guest like you, Allie, and tune in next week for the last episode of the season 1. Thanks again, Allie, for this episode, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. New episodes every Tuesday, and we'll see you next time on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Thank you very much.